For 2 centuries, this superpower ruled over the ancient world. This was an empire, home to dozens of different peoples. The first universal empire in history, Persia. In 330 BC, the soldiers of Alexander the Great burned Persepolis, its capital, to the ground. The Persians got what they deserved, their Macedonian conquerors said. Theirs was a tyrant state that oppressed its people. But in 1933, 2 scholars unearthed a different truth. They fell into a maelstrom of political intrigue and betrayal. One was destroyed. The other left a diary that tells their story for the first time. Southern Persia, spring 1929. An ancient inscription draws archaeologist Ernst Herzfeld to a royal tomb. Herzfeld, Germany's leading expert on ancient Persia, has come to read the testament of the great king Darius. The archaeologist is not a man given to the finer sides of life. Any interruption of his work is met by a snarling reproach, even if it holds the promise of some fresh poultry for dinner. It's painstaking work, using the simplest of means. Cigarette paper is the best way to trace the tiniest details of this inscription. The only evidence yet found about the nature of the world's first great empire. Herzfeld is coming up on 50, not young for field work. He's working on a new translation of Darius's last will and testament. I am Darius, King of Kings, King of the lands of all the peoples of this great broad earth, descended from the Achaemenids, an Aryan and son of a Persian. I ruled over the lands beyond Persia. They brought me tributes and obeyed my laws. Darius's tomb at Pasargadae is empty. Vultures carried his corpse to heaven. He's left a puzzle that Herzfeld and his assistant, Friedrich Krefter, must solve.
When my father met Herzfeld, he was already an experienced and well-known Orientalist and archaeologist, and my father was a young architect in Berlin who admired Herzfeld. My father always said Herzfeld had an unbelievably broad range of knowledge that my father found quite fascinating.
Krefter reads up on ancient history to get up to speed for the job. But Greek historians describe the Persians as uncivilized tyrants. Ernst Herzfeld doesn't trust Victor's history, even a version accepted for 2,000 years. There must be a reason this empire could last for 10 generations. The Persians ruled more land than any people before them. From North Africa to Central Asia, how could they dominate such a vast area? Even today, archaeologists are struggling with that question. This is Jinjun, in the Zagros Mountains in southern Persia. Imperial remains are regularly unearthed in this valley. Today's archaeologists are tracing how the network of power reached out from the ancient capital of Persepolis An Australian team from the University of Sydney has been granted a rare license to dig. They must observe the strict clothing laws of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Amanda Dusting's team don't yet have an ancient name for the impressive remains they're excavating. But they sense this is no village that grew organically.
The walls we've uncovered in their monumental size must mean that they're associated with a monumental building. If it's a monumental building, one would assume that hopefully this is associated with perhaps royal visitors.
So this place was a royal marker on the region. Perhaps there was a military garrison here. But one without defensive walls. That absence is in itself telling for Amanda Dusting.
It's possible that the Achaemenids, being here, we are in the heartland of the Achaemenid Empire, and there's such a strong power that they don't probably feel the need for fortification.
The rise to power of the Achaemenid dynasty began in these fertile valleys in 550 BC. Meltwater trickling down from the mountains makes for fertile soil all year round, even through the hot, dry summer. For a long time, the Persians were semi-nomads, descending to the valleys for their winters. Then they stayed and founded an empire. In the middle of this landscape at Pasargadae is the royal tomb of the empire's founder, Cyrus the Great. This may be his time-battered image. Cyrus's palace has borne more than 2,500 years of wind and rain. Two and a half millennia of rock-splitting heat and annual thaws. In 1929, Ernst Herzfeld is running out of time. He desperately wants to research something bigger than a king's tomb. But the French have a monopoly on digs in Iran. He needs a powerful political ally, the master of the imperial household, Timurtash, the second most important person in the country. It's a sensitive time to be a foreigner in Persia. The German Foreign Ministry still has a file devoted to Herzfeld's struggles with political intrigue. In the 1920s and 30s, all the great powers are jockeying for influence in oil-rich Persia. It's toughest for the Germans, the losers in World War I. Archaeologist Stefan Hauser explains.
Herzfeld is in a tough position. On the one hand, he has access to the Shah through Timurtash, but it's not a close relationship. He's working on the Shah's collection of ancient manuscripts and advises him on antiquities, but in the end, he's just a tolerated foreigner.
Herzfeld hopes to use the minister to shatter the French monopoly. They both know the young Shah sees himself as the heir to the great Achaemenid kings. If he wants to prove himself as an independent ruler, the Shah would be ill-advised to leave all excavations in the hands of just one foreign country. And let's be honest, it's the Germans who are at the forefront of archaeological research. The Americans have the financial means to engage in large-scale excavations, a combination that would be hard to beat. The Shah, Timurtash answers, may lean towards their position, but that they have mighty opponents. The big estate owners, much to Herzfeld's annoyance, are bent on keeping all finds on their land to themselves and making a fortune selling them on the international antiques market. Timurtaj proposes that Herzfeld should try and find a potent financial backer. Then, the government may be persuaded to grant him a license. Timurtaj has already made up his mind which site it should be. For the best, he says, only the best. What does Herzfeld think of Persepolis? Persepolis. The ancient Greeks called it the epicenter of decadence and tyranny. This was the Orient. Since its destruction by Alexander the Great, only its columns are left. The people who live in the area believe there are demons here. In their fear, they smashed the faces of the mythical creatures flanking the gates. European visitors gouged their names into the rock, in feeble imitation of the boasts of Persian kings. For Europeans, this was not a civilization to be respected. This wasn't art. These were crude copies stolen from other cultures. The Persians worshipped fire as a symbol of eternity and purity. Their greatest virtue was truth, a virtue their kings claimed as their own. The national philosophy split the world into good and evil. Anyone who questioned the king's authority was evil and was pitilessly crushed. Herzfeld sees contradictions in this black and white image of the world's first great empire. He needs evidence to put something in its place. By spring 1932, an American foundation is funding the excavations. Herzfeld now hires an assistant, architect Friedrich Krefter, for his knowledge of complex constructions. He is also a man of dry humor. "You're in bad company," he quips to his boss. Herzfeld, however, is too steeped in his work to enjoy the joke. Especially since they seem to have found the entrance to the palace's reception hall. But nearby, Krefter has noticed something he wants to show Herzfeld. He's certain that his observations may lead to something important. When he points out his find to Herzfeld, the professor is not impressed. A hole in the ground. Krefter believes this could be the entrance to a secret shaft, but he's brushed off. According to Herzfeld, the hole is part of the underground drainage system, and who's Krefter to disagree with the man in charge? Herzfeld is under pressure. The Shah is impatient, and the Americans too want to see results. Krefter wouldn't dare take any action without Herzfeld's approval. He begins to feel undervalued. He confides only in his diary. For a long time, Heiko Krefter kept the diary secret. But today, he talks about the changing relations between his father and Herzfeld as they excavated Persepolis.
My father was a qualified architect and already had his first small commissions in Berlin. But this was a completely new field, and Herzfeld was his mentor, his teacher. I think Herzfeld thought, this man could be my protege. That was the positive side. But one day he could also take all the glory from me. And I don't think he liked that feeling at all.
Krefter's diary tells of hard work, privations, arguments, and moments of perfect harmony.
Ihr seid soweit? Ich fahre übermorgen nach Teheran. Soll ich euch was mitbringen?
Herzfeld's team has two new members, come from a Germany radically changed by the Nazis' seizure of power. Herzfeld enjoys their company, playing his beloved Schubert after work. But Alexander Langsdorff is a fervent Nazi and racist. Herzfeld, who is of Jewish descent, is appalled by his views. Draftsman Karl Bergner is also Jewish, quiet and introspective. Only in the evenings is there harmony between them, when we play for the spirits of Persepolis, as Krefter writes in his diary. After weeks of painstaking work, they make a spectacular discovery, a palace relief. It shows provincial peoples paying tribute to the king. Guided by the hand of courtiers, the ambassadors step forward with precious metals, exotic animals. Every gift proclaims the greatness of the empire and its scale. In Persia's heyday, craftsmen and artists from every corner of the empire are in high demand in the capital. They all become part of a gigantic administrative machine, Persepolis. This place was purpose-built as an imperial capital. Its focal point was a gigantic, stepped palace complex resting on a platform of massive stone blocks. At 150,000 square meters, it was almost 3 times bigger than the Acropolis in Athens. It contained 3 main palaces, built alongside and above each other. Darius's Palace of Mirrors, the Imperial Throne Room, the Apadana, and the Hall of the 100 Columns, built by King Xerxes. Light, streaming in through the roof 20 meters above the floor, impressed and intimidated any subject who entered. Darius the Great and his successors borrowed the best from all their vassal peoples, creating a house style that would become Persian art. But this would be the power that really held the empire together: writing. The empire had grown as it had started. In some ways, the Persian kings never forgot their nomadic origins. No empire ever spread as fast as this, migrating across vast territories. Within 50 years, it had 10 million square kilometers under its rule. Small in numbers, the Persians needed to control a huge empire. 2,500 years ago, there was only one way to do that. The kings must have traveled constantly through their territory. Here at Jinjun, 200 kilometers from Persepolis, the team from Sydney University are excavating a building that may be a royal palace. But ceramics expert Ione Kat McRae isn't happy. The fragments she has found are very different from those in the capital or the founding city.
I think the interesting thing about this pottery is, in comparison to a site like Persepolis or Pasargad, we have quite a domestic, simple assemblage. There aren't a lot of very fine wares, which we do have in Persepolis and Pasargadae. It's more coarse ceramics, more of a domestic assemblage, which I think is quite interesting because this is supposedly a royal settlement, whereas the ceramics that we have for it are not very royal.
But there could be a reason for that. Maybe the team hasn't found anything valuable because the king brought everything he needed with him. From silver cutlery to flagons of pure gold. If not a palace, the archaeologists believe, this was a royal pavilion in stone, a stopping point on the king's travels.
I think it is a good modern-day parallel to think of this as a holiday house for the royals of Persepolis. So while there is the hotel manager and his family here at the site maintaining the place for the majority of the year, every now and then the royal family and his associates would come in and stay as well. I think this is an entirely plausible assumption.
80 years ago, none of this was known. Back in 1933, Herzfeld was deeply frustrated. There must be better evidence of the Persian Empire than friezes and reliefs commissioned by emperors. All they have found is propaganda by the Persians themselves or their Greek enemies. No concrete information about people's lives. While Herzfeld broods, Krefter has taken over the day-to-day running of the excavation. He has to make a multitude of decisions on the spot and about details that often spring up unexpectedly, but he's not allowed to decide anything without his boss's approval. Then, workers make the crucial find. The first evidence of everyday life in the Persian Empire. When Krefter finally reaches the professor, Herzfeld is visibly awed. He solemnly states that they have found nothing less than the memory of Persepolis. 30 liters of rye for Administrator Zakama, registered in the 5th month of the year 22. They have found a palace archive with more than 30,000 clay tablets, work contracts, receipts, delivery dockets. Today in Chicago, they're still deciphering them. A special camera with 22 lenses catches every mark and trace of ink. This is the three-dimensional seal of the palace authorities. Ancient Persian administrators had to know half a dozen languages, like Ernst Herzfeld in 1933, and Matthew Stolper today. People wrote in Babylonian, Aramaic, Elamite, Old Persian, and Greek. Matthew Stolper has devoted his professional life to decoding the tablets. And now he's passing on his knowledge to his students. Knowledge about real life in the Persian Empire.
What you see in these things is what that actually means, that this is not merely a kind of costume drama of a person decked with jewels being followed around by a retinue of fawning servants, that this actually means he's maintaining a household who are in themselves ranked in ways that are a sort of mirror of the way the royal court is ranked.
The texts help us decode other objects too. They confirm that most of the art in Persepolis came from the provinces. There was a cultural as well as a commercial exchange with the capital. Herzfeld knew at once the value of what he had discovered.
Herzfeld was a kind of polymath who had done a lot of work on art history, a lot of work on archaeology, but he'd also done a lot of work on the languages. And he had worked on Old Iranian languages, he had worked on Elamite. A great deal of his work was rather idiosyncratic and caused a lot of disagreement, but he knew what he was looking at when he saw these things, which was quite extraordinary. It would be rather hard to imagine an excavation director today stumbling across something as unexpected as this and saying, oh, I know what that is and why it's so important.
The Persepolis Archive is in Chicago, The Oriental Institute here financed Herzfeld's expedition, an archaeological triumph that was trumpeted around the world. The Institute had the means to make the most of it. They recorded the excavations on film, one of the first archaeological documentaries. This was the peak of Ernst Herzfeld's career. He would have little time to enjoy it. While Herzfeld basked in his sudden fame, Krefter set up excavation headquarters in what was once the royal harem, much to his boss's amusement. It's hilarious. We should patent the ground plan for an elegant brothel, Herzfeld cabled the German embassy. Krefter is first class. But in Germany, the new government had just passed a measure that would ruin Herzfeld.
The Nazi takeover in Germany was a crucial event for Herzfeld. He was directly affected by the law for the re-establishment of the career civil service. In spite of its harmless title, the effect of the law was to ban all Jews from public employment. Herzfeld was declared a Jew, and his professorship, from which he had taken a sabbatical, was suddenly in the balance.
Showing distinguished visitors around Persepolis, Herzfeld can still put a good face on things. But his time is running out. Basic archaeological techniques haven't changed that much in 80 years, and neither have political sensitivities, because archaeology always deals in national myths and identities. Luckily, relations between the Iranian authorities and the Australian team are good, and have been for some time. Every find they make increases the prestige of the Persian Empire, and that reflects well on Iran today. By analyzing the chemical makeup of soil samples, Amanda Dusting's team know where to dig for another exciting discovery. Finely cut, bell-shaped stones with a diameter of 1.5 meters. Column bases of the kind Persian kings use for their palaces. More evidence this could be a palace for an itinerant king.
Seem to conform to the type from Persepolis, which means that if they come from quarries at Persepolis, it means that we've got a really important structure that warrants the importation of incredibly immense sizes of column bases. It's probable that our column shafts could be up to between 8 to 10 metres high. So we're looking at a structure which goes from the terrace down here, the floor, 10 metres high, which is something enormous.
As they clear the stone floor around the columns, Amanda's team are revealing something more. An important unifying factor in the empire.
Here we have a building that, as yet to be determined, its complete floor plan, but I believe that it's something that is truly Achaemenid. Given the expertise and the way in which the architectural and sculptural styles in Persia used. Although they used other expertise from abroad, they created their own style from that. and I can't see the barbarian here.
Amanda is sure the Persians were not barbaric tyrants. The people who worked here, no foreign slaves, but well-paid craftsmen. They made the empire a melting pot of the cultures. In 1933, that inclusive spirit is out of sync with the times. Friedrich Krefter notes with concern that the poisonous atmosphere in Germany has seeped through to Persepolis. Ernst Herzfeld is off to Europe. He needs money. America is deep in depression. Funding has been cut back. The excavation may have to be abandoned. And Herzfeld is about to lose his professorship in Berlin. The pain of his dismissal is almost too much for him. Krefter doesn't quite understand what his mentor is going through. He feels abandoned in Persia. At least now, no one can tell him what to do. He finally has a chance to back an old hunch. That strange shaft in the palace walls. Herzfeld thought it led to a water conduit. As an architect, Krefter believes it must be something else. A meter down, they hit a flat stone. More and more men gather around the shaft as the outlines of a chest emerge. The chest opens easily at the first attempt. Krefter senses unrest among the men. Is it excitement or greed? The object Krefter found that day is now the most valuable and best protected treasure in the National Museum in Tehran. 5 kilos of pure gold. The first words of the inscription read, "I am Darius." This is the charter of the foundation of Persepolis from about 520 BC. At last, we know which Persian king began the building of the palace complex. Darius wanted a capital city that would reflect the glory of his empire. With a single stunning find, Friedrich Krefter stepped out of his mentor's shadow. Without archaeological training, without studying ancient civilizations, he had eclipsed a career of painstaking application. Far away in his hour of need, fighting for his professional life, Herzfeld could never forgive Krefter for his intuition and his good luck.
I certainly think it made him very happy. It must be an amazing feeling to be the first person in 2,500 years to hold something in your hands that was probably last seen by King Darius. My father was the kind of man who would be reserved, even at moments like that. And so this is the entry in his diary. Today there was a lucky star over Persepolis, and we discovered and excavated the founding charter of the city. And that's it.
In spite of his good luck, Krefter is worried. He doesn't know who he can trust in Persepolis. He starts using code words in his diary. Someone appears under the name of Spray.
For a long time, I couldn't work out who that could be, until I realized from other documents that for a while, Spree was a code name for Herzfeld in the communications between my father, who was in charge of the operation while Herzfeld was away, and the German embassy in Tehran. They must have been worried that the Iranians were reading the telegrams.
Den Telegrammverkehr irgendwie mitlesen würden.
They have good reason to worry. Before Herzfeld can leave Persia, his journey takes a dramatic turn on the Persia-Iraq border. Herzfeld has no idea he has lost all influence at court. His protector, the Minister of the Household, is in disgrace with the Shah. Herzfeld's brusque manner has offended too many powerful men. Iran's great landowners have an account to settle with Herzfeld. He once accused them of stealing their country's ancient treasures. And when he helped ban the illegal trade in ancient finds, that was the last straw. The border guards seem to be ready for him when his Mercedes pulls up at their post. His driver is suspicious, but Herzfeld is expecting little more than the usual controls. In spite of his diplomatic passport, his bags are searched. The guards seem to know exactly what they want. Herzfeld always travels with some ancient artifacts that belong to him. When his bags are searched, Herzfeld loses his temper. He threatens to raise a scandal at court. His protestations are in vain. His belongings are confiscated. Herzfeld has no choice but to accept this humiliation. He's allowed to travel on, but the trap his enemies have set has worked. He later proves the confiscated objects had nothing to do with Persepolis, but the damage is done. There are people in Germany who are all too willing to label him a smuggler. Jealous competitors in the academic world dismiss him as a typical international Jew, a smuggler of artworks. Even Herzfeld's former colleague Alexander Langsdorff, now back in Germany, denounces him. The archives of the Foreign Ministry, researched by Stefan Hauser, show that Herzfeld was the victim of a malicious campaign.
Looking at the files of his expulsion from his professorship, it's embarrassing to see how Herzfeld's colleagues, previously so respectful to him, now take their revenge. Long-lasting academic feuds overflow into the political sphere. They're used to denounce him and to end his career as a professor in Germany.
Denunzieren als jemanden, der als deutscher Professor nicht weiter tätig sein dürfte.
Herzfeld fights, but there's nowhere he can go but back to Persepolis. He carries on working. In his despair, he can no longer distinguish friends from enemies. He never speaks to Krefter again. The two men communicate only in writing. Krefter, for his part, feels that Herzfeld has used him, refusing him credit for his discoveries. Krefter is now running the excavations. Herzfeld's strength is failing. He's ill, with high blood pressure, perhaps the complications of malaria. Herzfeld believes that Krefter wants to take over, that behind his back he's plotting, betraying him. Krefter writes a letter of resignation, polite, but full of bitter recriminations.
Dieser Brief zeigt eben die Enttäuschung.
This letter shows my father's disappointment. He had begun to understand that Herzfeld had used him. In spite of his promises, Herzfeld neither promoted nor supported him. By the end, he felt he had been exploited.
For Herzfeld, only the dried earth of the tablets of Persepolis remained. Those tablets are still revealing their secrets today. For years, Matthew Stolper has come across the place name Liduma, a palace that has never been localized. The description is tantalizingly close to the remains found by the Australian team in Jinjun.
Liduma occurs quite a few times, and on the first 3,000 or 4,000 tablets, it appears at least 85 or 90 times. And it's a fairly important place. It's a place in which there are storage facilities and in which rations are being collected and handed out, and sometimes handed out to sort of interesting groups of travelers. So one of the things I have here is a series of the tablets that mention this place. It's certainly on the road, along the road that connected Persepolis with Susa, so it's also one of the main stopping points for parties along there. The palace that is it's clearly a major residential structure that's being investigated is far enough off where the road itself would go through the valley it's probably not the same place these guys are handing out, but it may very well be that place. This place, Liduma, should be somewhere in that vicinity, so it's quite possible.
If the Australians' palace is Liduma, then archaeologists will have to rewrite the route of the road from Persepolis to Susa. And if a new road is found, there may be many ancient towns and palaces to discover on the way. The work will take years because the digging season is short. They'll soon be packing up here in Jinjun. Amanda Dusting's team hasn't given up hope of finding tablets or writings on the palace walls that would reveal the name of the complex and the role it played in the empire.
It would be wonderful if we could find some kind of inscription. Just some kind of inscription in Greek, cuneiform, anything that would say specifically the place. It may be giving us a name, maybe saying this is a particular place mentioned in texts. It would be wonderful. And or mentioning a particular ruler or deity.
There's still plenty of puzzles about this empire. But Herzfeld's tablets prove that a commercial network was a vital element in its cohesion. Strict administration held this giant empire together. That's what Iona Cat McRae believes. She dreams of making a similar discovery to Herzfeld's.
I would love to find some clay tablets someday. The first season that I came here, I said that I would find a clay tablet, but as yet I have found nothing.
But what if the absence of further finds of tablets, like the lack of precious objects here, could be the clearest evidence of the nature of the empire? That it was centralized to an extraordinary degree, a purpose-built capital with purpose-built satellites.
I think that this site was definitely constructed after Persepolis. I think that this is a later settlement, and that is easy to see with the architecture of the site, which is based on Persepolis, but is not as fine as Persepolis or Pasargadae. So I think that these structures were built first. These big cities came first, and this is a later settlement. Equally, I think it is possible that this settlement was abandoned or, was no longer used before the collapse of the Achaemenid Empire.
Persia's kings ruled for 230 years, 2.5 centuries in which the ancient Orient knew more stability than at any other time in its history. The ruins of Persepolis and other cities, the clay tablets Herzfeld discovered, are slowly revealing the Persians, their ideology, politics, and religion from original Persian sources. These were no barbarians, as the chroniclers of Alexander the Great would have us believe. In his golden charter, King Darius promised the peoples of his empire that he would make this a high culture. It seems that he kept his promise. But today we can only guess what that culture must have been like. Beside the ruins, little more than the archive of clay tablets and the gold plaques survived the blaze set by Alexander in 330 BC. For Ernst Herzfeld, those flames marked the end of an era of world history. With that fire, the world of the ancient Orient disappeared, he wrote. It was a magnificent downfall. Herzfeld too experienced his fame and his downfall in Persepolis. In 1935, he was forced to leave Persia for good. The Shah banished him from the country. Herzfeld was homeless, a broken man. Impossible to come to terms with exile in America. He never got over losing everything in his homeland. He never saw Germany again. His colleague Alexander Langsdorff had a stellar career in the ancestry department of the SS. He defamed Herzfeld after returning to Berlin. Karl Bergner had nowhere to run. As a Jew, he was terrified of returning to Germany. When the excavation ended, he killed himself. It's possible that Herzfeld never knew. Friedrich Krefter, his closest colleague, will never cross paths with Herzfeld again.
As far as I know, they never saw each other again, which is astonishing after such an intensive time.
Herzfeld died on January 21st, 1948, at the age of 69. His unimposing grave is in Basel, Switzerland. Only one member of the 1930s German expedition would see ancient Persia again. After a career interrupted by service in the German army in World War II, Friedrich Krefft became a university lecturer and architect. In 1971, he traveled to Persepolis on the invitation of the Shah. Archaeologists today still make use of his reconstruction drawings in their work. "40 years after Kreft's last visit to Persepolis, one final legacy has surfaced. Kreft's diary from that time is the only apolitical source about the events of those years in Persepolis."